Our time together is drawing near to end, and somebody said to me at break, "This is an awful lot to take in. I'm surprised you're all still here." It's a lot. It's a lot. So let's all take a deep breath. Let it out. This time, take a deep breath and let it out with a sigh, a real noisy sigh. Ah. And again. Ah. Sighing is a spiritual practice. And somebody reminded us early, I think, the musicians, that sighing is biblical as well. The spirit that sighs too deep for words. So it has that sense. I know when I get home from a trip, my husband always kind of sits there and I just start sighing. He said, it's that wonderful thing which is, It's so nice just to have that feeling, that wonderful sense of letting it go, being contented. And it's not a complaining sigh. It's just a, So remember tonight when you go home to sigh a lot. Sigh a lot. In this last time together that we have, I want you to start thinking about how you might take what we've been doing here back into your congregations. That this weekend has not been only about you, but it's been about your congregations and what might happen. And I've asked you as we've gone along to think about things that, well, maybe this might work in our congregation, this wouldn't work in our congregation. But I want to, and I know a lot of you came in your community groups. If some of you came, just 2 or 3 of you, or you came by yourself from your own congregation, join another small group to kind of hear what some of the ideas are. But I want to give you some guidelines for planning. Because one of the things that can happen after a weekend like this, and we've had such a good time together, and there's been such rich sharing, and memories have been evoked, and you just want to go back and do it in your congregation tomorrow. That won't work. It won't work. You need to have some kinds of plans. So let me just give you a few ideas, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of reflection and then share together with your groups or at your table. The first thing is that my book, A Praying Congregation, I wanted the title to be Becoming a Praying Congregation, because I don't think we ever become a praying congregation. We're always in the process. But book publishing and editing is an odd and strange thing, and Alban Institute had just had another book title that started Becoming, and they couldn't confuse the two. So they dropped Becoming off of my title and called it A Praying Congregation. But as you think about it, what I'd like you to think about is your congregation in the process of becoming. It never will get there. It's an ongoing process. And in thinking about that, that's what I call in our planning thoughts the direction in which you're headed. You're headed in the direction of becoming a praying congregation. And that's a wonderful direction, and yet at the same time, it's very hard to say how you're making progress. Because it's a great direction, but then how do you organize that? How do you go about becoming a praying congregation? What do you do first? Who do you involve? All of those questions. But to hold that vision. Now, I came up with this plan back when I was teaching 5th grade, because I wanted students to begin to think about taking responsibility for their own learning. And they would often say to me, "This year I'm going to really become a good reader." Well, now that's a really good direction. How do you know when you've become a really good reader? Well, I'm just going to become one. No, it doesn't work that way. And I think as adults in congregations, although it's not quite that clear, we have some of that idea. And the thing I used to say to them was, I would talk to them about choosing a direction. And so direction might be being a good reader. In our case, it's becoming a praying congregation. But I would use it very physically, and I'd say, now, if I choose a direction and it's west, okay, then I'm going to get my direction and I'm going to go west. Now, am I West yet? Oh, they said. Well, am I West yet? And as one little kid said, well, you're Wester. But that whole sense, which is, how do we know and how do we plan what we're doing? So we need a direction. And then we need some goals. We need some specific goals. What would it look like in your congregation to take a step toward becoming a praying congregation? Does it mean forming a committee? If you're not here with anybody else, don't go back and try to do it alone. Your first step needs to be get 2 or 3 people who are like-minded, who could work together with you around becoming more of a praying congregation. And then there's the possibility of becoming a praying congregation that I could start a book group, or I could show these DVDs, or I could begin in my worship service to offer some of these possibilities, or I could hold a training program for intercessory prayers in my congregation. A lot of things we've been doing here, and some of them more informally, like asking people how they learn to pray, finding ways in committees that are already formed to share a spiritual experience that week. One of my friends who's a rector started his vestry meetings. He used to do the prayer. He would open it with prayer. But he wanted to change that, and he started his vestry meetings with going around the table, asking people to just share very briefly where they had experienced God in their life that week. Now, the first time he did it, people got really anxious. But he said, this is how we're going to start every vestry meeting, so you better start watching for God in your life so you'll have something to tell us when the meeting starts. You can program that kind of thing so that the praying gets expanded out, and the church leaders, the rectors, the deacons aren't the only ones who pray. There are so many ways. The problem is there are so many ways. Where are you going to start? Where are you going to start to go west, to go toward becoming a praying congregation? What's the best place to start? And so I want to ask you, just individually, even if you're here with a group, just to make some few notes on this, and I'm going to ask you 3 reflection questions. Because I think as you think of this individually and then can share these with your group, a lot more will come forth. So the first thing, when we're headed in one direction, before we start off, it's wise to look behind. And what I'd like you to reflect on is what's already in place in the life of prayer in your congregation. What's already there? I don't believe any of your congregations are starting with no prayer. And even if you say, well, at least we pray together on Sunday mornings, that's one thing that you're doing. What else is going on in your congregation that would fit into this movement toward becoming a praying congregation? Because I think on somewhere on that scheme, you're all ready. All of you are already on the way. So take a few moments just to make note. What's already in place that makes you a praying congregation? And for the bishop and the bishop-elect, you might think of that in your diocese. What's already there? Celebrate what's already there. The second question to reflect on, I know I'm moving fast here because we're not going to try and get your plans and everything in place by 4 o'clock. That's not the goal here. The goal is to provide you with some tools and ways of thinking so that as you do some sharing here but go back to your congregations, you have some kind of a form or guidelines of how you might proceed. The second one is an important one, and that is, as you look at your congregation, as you sense what's going on there, what are their needs, their longings, and their hopes? What do you sense from interacting with people, from talking with people, from pastoral care, from book clubs? What is your sense of what they're longing for, hoping for, needing? Because we can too often say, oh, I love this idea, I'm going to give it to them. But it's like scratching an itch that's not there. What are they longing for? What do you think they're needing in their lives right now? Is it more community prayer? Is it more information about prayer? Is it more study about prayer? Is it more opportunity to talk about prayer? What do you think their longings are? Then after you've looked at what's already there and you look at the longings and hopes of the people in your congregation, then the time to ask the question, what might I do? What might I offer that would help to meet those needs? And take our church, take our congregation just one more step toward becoming a praying congregation. Then when you feel ready at your tables, I would invite you to begin to share. First off, share together what you see collectively that's already in place. So you know you're not starting at zero. You're all on your way. So celebrate what's there, and then ask the question of one another, what do you think people are longing for? One of you might see one thing and somebody else might see another. So play with those longings and then begin that process of what might we do. The temptation is to go right to the third one. Notice, I'll say it again. The temptation is to say, let's do this. Don't do that until you've done the first two. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to do this, to be on your work at your table. If you feel like you're at a table that's not going to be helpful to you because it's a completely different congregation or whatever, don't be offended if somebody gets up and leaves and joins another table, okay? They're finding what they need first.
And that was me.
Knowing that you have not yet finished planning for the next 2 years of becoming a praying congregation, my hope is that you have the first step, some ideas where your friends and colleagues and members are, and some of the possibilities of where you might be headed. this is an ongoing process, and one of the things that I found at a conference like this is you can make the most perfect plan, and as soon as you go back to your congregation, you realize it won't work. And so what we need to do is not create the perfect plan, but have it in process, be aware of paying attention to, this sounded like a good idea on Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, but I don't think that's what these people need or are ready for. And a lot of it has to do not only with longing, but for readiness. What are people ready for? And if you really believe that there's something needed and they're not quite ready for it, how can you gently move forward? How can you, remember where we started last night, prepare their hearts? Find ways to prepare their hearts for what it is that you're hoping to bring into the congregation. And sometimes that preparing of the hearts is the major part of the work. And it's also the part that we often skip over because we're so excited about what could happen. But if hearts aren't ready, the seeds will fall on thorns, on dry ground, on rocky fields, and nothing will happen. So always go back to that beginning place of how are you preparing hearts for what it is that you wish to bring in to your congregations, and what you believe God is calling you to bring in, and what you believe at some very deep level that the people are longing for, even if they're not aware of that. And so knowing that you don't have the perfect plan, but that you have some ideas of where you're headed, I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes with the microphones. And if you're ready to make a declaration of what you're going to do in your congregation, that would be great. If you have questions left over from anything that's been going on this weekend, or insights, or a story you realize, I just want to tell this story, we've got about 10 minutes to do that. So please, the sharing has been very rich, and I've appreciated your willingness to come forth to the microphones and speak what it is you need to say.
There are 5 of us from an urban parish. Doesn't matter much who we are. But the very strong, unspoken need that resonated with us is the process of offering help in building prayer to the busy, urban, hectic life. And that's what I think we're going to try organizing.
Good. Thank you for that. Wonderful place to start. Thank you.
After the last session, one of the sections I was sharing with, I forget her name now, but the girl who has the display here, and who is a poet. And I was sharing that I also write poetry, but I said there's one poem that's very special to me, not that I wrote, but that I found in a Sunday school paper, and it has to do with prayer. I'm of a sort of Heinz 57 background. I was raised First Brethren, and then we went to the Baptist church. And then as a youth, I switched to the Pentecostal church. And I was there for 32 years, until I ended up at St. Thomas's. But this little poem was in a Pentecostal Sunday school paper, and it says, "There is a viewless, wasted room, as high as heaven, as fair as day, where though my feet may join the throne, my soul can enter in and pray. One listening even cannot know when I have crossed the threshold more, for he alone who hears my prayer has heard the shutting of the door."
Thank you. Thank you so much.
As you predicted in our group, we were inclined to jump to number 3 with all the ideas. And I think that inclination has been a great day, and people will want to act on a lot of things they thought of. But one of our group had an excellent suggestion of more of a staged approach, perhaps a slow introduction of things, not all on the first Sunday. So I thought that was pretty good. And she actually also pointed out that way we'll catch the people that don't make it every week. So.
Thank you for that reality check.
I have a great Ugandan friend. She was born a Roman Catholic in Uganda, and her father was a lay reader and apparently did a great number of building the Catholic churches in Uganda. There's a Church of Uganda, which is an Anglican church, and the two have been together in Uganda for a long time, since the missionary efforts. But she said to me quite recently, if you help another person up the hill, you'll find that you yourself are up that hill too. And I guess as you think, we've been talking in collective terms, but that sense, if you help another person up the hill, you yourself have risen up that hill, is one to remember too, because being able to be intimate with people isn't always easy at the collective level, but you're going up if you're helping somebody else up the way.
Thank you. Thank you for that wisdom. Anybody else? Well, then let us prepare for our closing worship.